Here is the exact text rewritten without skipping or missing any words, keeping all wording intact, only formatted cleanly, no words added or removed. The next day, and we were all feeling very hungover, and in the first scene I saw a lady sitting in a blue coat in about the second row, and I said, looking a bit kind of like that. So I said to the company in the something like the "and I know what we'll do." Everyone believed Dame Judi Dench stood above conflict Britain's untouchable treasure. She could command Shakespeare, silence a theatre, and disarm an audience with a single glance. But that image wasn't the whole truth. At 91, she began admitting something no one expected. Some of the people she worked with didn't just challenge her. They humiliated her, pushed her aside, and took what should have been hers. Once you hear who crossed that line, you'll never watch their performances together the same way again. Number 1. Harvey Weinstein, the producer who tried to silence her mind. If you rank the people Judi Dench quietly couldn't stand, this name would sit at the very top. Harvey Weinstein, one of Hollywood's most powerful film producers. And the reason was simple. He spoke to her like she didn't think for herself. The incident happened during an award season in the early 2000s when Dench was once again being positioned as a major contender. Weinstein had taken control of the campaign. Dench noticed something was off almost immediately. The talking points didn't sound like her. The narrative leaned heavily into fragility, age, and sentiment instead of craft and authority. She asked why. She just wanted to understand who was deciding how she was being presented. That question led to a private meeting in Weinstein's office. What happened next is the reason she never trusted him again. When Dench challenged one publicity angle and suggested a change, Weinstein leaned back, smiled, and said, "Judi, leave the thinking to us. You just show up." Dench looked at him for a moment and replied quietly, "I've been thinking for myself entire career." That was it. There was no argument after that. Dench didn't debate him. She didn't raise her voice. She stood up, ended the meeting, and walked out. Weinstein didn't stop her. He didn't follow. He didn't apologize. From that day forward, Dench shut him out. She reduced contact to the bare minimum. She declined projects connected too closely to him. When interaction couldn't be avoided, she set strict limits. What shocked insiders was Weinstein's reaction. A man known for pressure and retaliation never pushed back. He never tried to regain control. He knew the door was closed. Why? Years later, when Weinstein's behavior became public knowledge, Dench expressed disbelief in interviews. Privately, those close to her said she wasn't confused at all. She had already seen exactly who he was years earlier in that one sentence. He tried to take away her authority, and Judi Dench never let him do it twice. Number 2. Daniel Day-Lewis, the co-star who pretended she didn't exist. Second on Judi Dench's list comes the name people argue about the most because on paper this pairing should never have gone wrong. Daniel Lewis. No scandal, no shouting, no public fallout. And yet this was one of the rare cases where Dench didn't just walk away from a person. She shut the door and never looked back. From the first days they shared a set, Day-Lewis stayed sealed inside his method. He didn't greet Dench in the morning. He didn't acknowledge her between takes. Crew members noticed how conversation stopped when he entered, how he paced alone, how he avoided eye contact unless the camera was ready. At first, people brushed it off as dedication. Dench didn't. Things turned unmistakable during preparation for a key shared scene. Dench approached him quietly, script in hand, wanting to discuss pacing and emotional emphasis. Instead of responding to her, Lewis never looked at her. He never said her name. Dench paused, then said calmly, "Daniel, I'm speaking to you, not the character." He didn't respond. It happened in front of the entire room. That moment hit hard. She tried once more later that day, suggesting they run the scene before filming. Day-Lewis refused. He said truth could only exist inside the take. The conversation ended before it began. From then on, communication froze. Crew members recalled Dench waiting between setups, hands folded, script pressed against her chest, while Day-Lewis remained unreachable, locked inside himself. Years later, Dench finally put words to what happened, choosing them carefully. "I find it difficult when people refuse to acknowledge you as a human being." That sentence wasn't abstract. It was precise. She never attacked him. She never challenged his reputation. Publicly, she praised his talent as she always had. Privately, she made a firm decision. She would never work with him again. Number 3. Kenneth Branagh. When the protege publicly corrected the master, there is a question that has haunted British theatre circles for years. When did Kenneth Branagh decide he no longer needed to listen to Judi Dench? What happened between them never felt like a normal creative disagreement. It felt like a quiet rupture that never healed. Their relationship had started with admiration. Branagh openly revered Dench early in his career. He studied her rhythm, her command of text, her discipline on stage. Dench, in turn, respected his ambition and raw energy. For a time, they were seen as the perfect bridge between generations. However, it didn't last long. The shift came during rehearsals for one of Branagh's Shakespeare's projects in the early 1990s, right as his fame exploded. Dench arrived the way she always did, fully prepared and lines broken down. She offered a version of a scene she had worked through privately, expecting discussion. Instead, Branagh stopped her. In front of the cast and crew, he dismissed her interpretation and told her she was overthinking the rhythm. He suggested she should trust the freshness and speed he wanted, implying that her approach belonged to an older way of working. The room went silent. Dench wasn't offended by disagreement. She had built her career on debate. What stunned her was being corrected publicly by someone who had once sought her approval. The power balance had flipped and Branagh seemed eager to prove it. From that moment on, the tone changed. Rehearsals grew tense. Decisions came faster and with less conversation. Dench pushed back quietly, tightening her precision rather than raising her voice. Notes were exchanged instead of spoken. Dench felt dismissed, not as an actress, but as a mentor whose experience no longer mattered. After the project wrapped, there was no angry interviews, no public feud. Dench simply stepped away. Future collaborations never materialized. When interviewers asked about Branagh, her answers became short, careful, stripped of warmth. They remain civil today. They acknowledge each other's talent, but whatever bond once existed never returned. For Judi Dench, this wasn't about ego. It was about respect being withdrawn in front of witnesses. And once that line was crossed, she never stepped back into the room. Number 4. Maggie Smith. The sentence that killed a friendship. For years, Dench and Smith were treated as a single image. Two queens of the British stage, two women who had survived the same battles, earned the same respect, and understood the unspoken rules of rehearsal rooms. They joked together in public, defended each other in interviews, and were booked together precisely because producers believed their bond was unbreakable. That illusion collapsed during rehearsals for a major West End production in the late 1980s. The tension had been building quietly. Smith was under heavy pressure, juggling commitments and relentless press attention. Dench, as always, stayed focused on the work. During a run-through of a pivotal scene shared between them, Dench paused and asked a simple question about emotional timing. Smith snapped. She turned to Dench in front of the entire cast and crew and said, "If you want to direct the play, Judi, just say so." Dench didn't respond. She didn't defend herself. But the room felt instantly colder. What made the moment cut so deeply wasn't the words themselves, but what they implied. That Dench precision was interference, not professionalism. From that rehearsal onward, something fundamental changed. On stage, the performances remained flawless. Offstage, warmth vanished. Smith leaned into sharp humor. Dench retreated into calm restraint. Conversations shortened and eye contact faded. When the production ended, Dench thanked everyone politely and just left. She never said a word to Smith. In later interviews, Dench spoke of Smith with respect, even admiration. But something was missing. The affection was gone. The sense of shared ground never returned. They were never friends again. For Judi Dench, this was one of the most painful because it came from someone who should have known better. Number 5. Steve Coogan. The joke that ended all respect. The last name on Judi Dench's list came from a room that was supposed to feel light, collaborative, even playful. Instead, it left her colder than any argument ever could. That name was Steve Coogan, and the break happened fast. They were paired on a project meant to balance weight and wit. Dench brought structure and emotional precision. Coogan brought speed, irony, and improvisation. At first, it worked. She appreciated his timing. He seemed impressed by her preparation. The tone felt easy until it didn't. The shift came during an early table read. Dench paused on a scene and asked about the emotional spine of a line, the reason it landed where it did. Before the director could answer, Coogan cut in with a grin and tossed out a comment meant to get a laugh. The audience isn't writing a thesis, Judy. The room laughed. Dench didn't. From that moment on, rehearsals felt uneven. Coogan riffed freely, reshaping lines on the fly. Dench stuck to what she had built, precise and contained. Feedback became one-sided. When she offered notes, they were brushed off with humor that deflected rather than engaged. Crew members noticed how she waited longer between comments, how she stopped pushing for adjustments, how she watched rather than participated. The breaking point came during a rewrite session. Coogan suggested trimming one of Dench's monologues, saying the project needed more charm, less lecture. It landed as playful. It wasn't received that way. Dench closed her folder, met his eyes once, and said nothing. The conversation ended there. After the project wrapped, Dench avoided discussing him entirely. Interviews brought his name up. Her answers stayed brief, neutral, and empty of warmth. No criticism followed,